Anything I say today that piques an interest and you decide that you want to learn more, by all means, reach out and I'll be happy to go a little bit deeper into the topic with you. All right. So also, just because this is one of many sessions that you'll hopefully be hanging in with throughout the next few days, just keep in mind, these are high-level presentations, usually about 15 minutes or so with some time for Q&A. Really, the entire program was very carefully thought out, and I can't recommend enough how valuable it is for you to have access to all of this content. I can't imagine how useful this would have been to me when I was a student. Absolutely didn't have any of this information, had to find it all of ourselves. So it's an incredible resource, and I really hope this does end up becoming a regular fixture here at UTC for career development. So I just want to start, and I'm gonna, let's see, try to get this. It's always hard to figure out where to put you guys. All right, I'm gonna put you down here so I know where you are. All right. I'm going to start just by doing a little bit of a reality check for you. A lot of folks, and especially students that haven't had tons of time interacting with organizations and employers, they're really surprised when they hit the job market or they apply for an internship. And the very first thing often that they are hit with is a request to take an assessment. It's definitely becoming the norm. Recent surveys of employers show that 80 to 90% of them are using some form of pre or post-employment assessment to either help them make decisions about which applicants they're going to bring in, or to help them guide the onboarding or the new employee training efforts that they put into people that they hire. And then even more organizations are using some form of assessment after somebody's been with the company for a while to figure out, how do we develop this person? What do we do with them? Are they going to be leadership potential? Are they going to grow and develop with us, or are they a risk for early stage turnover? So assessments are definitely here to stay. And what's important for you to understand is that this was not always the case. Like until about maybe 10 years ago, assessments existed, okay, but they were very different. The early days of personnel assessment involved very clinical diagnostics, one-on-one type assessments, sitting down with a licensed psychologist in many cases, trying to figure out, what your innermost motivations were. These days, most assessments are what they call unproctored, internet-based. So you'll often take them on a phone, a laptop, tablet. You'll take them anywhere you happen to be. And the assessments tend to be directed more as an opportunity for you to express who you are. So the landscape has changed a lot, and as a result, these assessments are everywhere. The thing that a lot of students struggle with, though, is that when they get to the point of seeking employment, the first thought they have is, I was hoping I would never take a test again. Okay, so that's a silly perspective, because every day is a test, and we need to kind of get over that and realize that these are not the same kinds of tests that you were used to at the university. These are not tests often for which there's a right and a wrong answer. And these are not tests that affect your GPA. These are tests that help to ensure that you fit well to where you end up. And more importantly, these are tests that can help an organization support you and help you to develop your career potential over time. Another common concern that we hear from candidates, especially students that are entering the market, is, well, I have testing anxiety. So can't that help me out in some way? Because you're very used often to having supports and accommodations at the university. And these are good things in an academic setting, but you have to understand that most employers really don't care. And so the challenge as a student is that you need to use this protected time while you're here and develop and fine tune your strategies for how you're going to manage those anxieties. And I'm not trying to minimize the reality of testing anxiety at all. I understand it's a thing. But you also have to understand that when you're outside of the academic environment, not all organizations have to accommodate that the same way. So when you're here, work on developing strategies for approaching this idea of taking an assessment, and realize again that these assessments are different. These assessments are designed to help you figure out who you are, how you are, what your motivations are, what your interests are. These don't need to be as stressful as like the final exam that dictates the grade that you're going to get for the biggest class that you've ever taken, okay? So a lot of times it's a mindset shift that's required. And then there's the other one that I often love to hear, which is that I don't believe in testing. There's no way that testing can possibly, say what it needs to say about me to the world. And, this is a nice perspective. And I know there's a lot of free thinkers in, university environments. But the reaction I have to share with you on this one is That's nice. Did you want a job? Because like most organizations, again, this is a process. So they use the assessment as part of the way they consistently and fairly evaluate people. So at some point, we kind of have to get past our maybe philosophical beliefs about whether assessments are perfect or flawed, and realize that even in their flawed state, they often provide organizations with a way of comparing applicants apples to apples. And we actually should be pretty thankful for this, because a well-designed assessment levels the playing field way beyond what would be possible in organizations that don't use assessments at all. Okay, so in other words, assessments can be your friend when they're well-designed, when they're actually implemented the way that they should be implemented. And more organizations are learning how to do this right. All right, I got to get rid of this. Sorry, guys. I love seeing you here, but I can't see my darn slides. Let's see here. Goodbye. All right. Career assessment features. So some things to look for as you're out there taking assessments. You're going to find them in all different types of flavors. We've got assessments that target personality, temperament, underlying dispositions, skills, abilities, knowledge, competencies, past experiences, motivational characteristics, and then the big picture issue of fit. And all fit really is the extent to which you have these individual characteristics that allow you or are likely to allow you to be successful in a particular work context. And what makes it even more interesting in the assessment world is that we can assess these different targets in a lot of different ways. So sometimes companies will actually still give you a paper and pencil assessment. Sit down in a room and you fill out the blanks. But a lot of times, as I said before, it's internet-based now. Sometimes they're proctored exams, meaning somebody's standing there watching over the shoulder. But a lot of times these days, these assessments are unproctored. Sometimes the assessments don't even feel like a test. They're actually asking for a work sample. So the company will say to you, give me a portfolio, or give me a writing sample, or demonstrate your presentation abilities. Sometimes companies get real creative and they actually have developed computer simulations and games that are designed to test your problem solving and your interaction with other people. Sometimes the assessment is not a test at all, but actually an interview or a role play. But the thing is, it can still be an assessment because it allows the organization to learn about you, and it allows you often to learn about yourself. In fact, one of the most powerful ways of learning about our strengths and weaknesses is to engage in what's called an assessment center activity. And this is often done for very senior level leadership roles, but they'll bring individuals into an environment where they're part of a group evaluation. And there might be 10 or 15 evaluators watching. It's really unnerving. And these individuals be seated around the room in different places or even behind one-way mirrors. And they'll be looking to evaluate your behaviors and your emotional displays and how you're communicating with others. And then you get all this feedback at the end. And it's a tremendously powerful developmental experience, but it's also kind of stressful for people who don't like feeling like they're a fish in a fishbowl. The other thing to keep in mind is that assessments are changing all the time. So the big thing right now, and the big buzz topic for a lot of folks, is this idea of artificial intelligence. And I'm not going to get deep into this today, but you got to understand that assessments are not static anymore. So in many organizations, when you sit down to take a test, the test you take is not going to be exactly the same as the test that other candidates take, because there are fancy computer algorithms running behind the scenes that are going to tailor that test to fit you more specifically. And this may sound like really futuristic and new, but in truth, it's been happening for over a decade in the assessment world. And anyone who's taken the GRE or the SAT, even recently, you've actually taken an AI enhanced assessment. It actually funnels in and focuses on your ability and then establishes your score level very quickly and more efficiently than the old assessments ever did. So the point is that assessment is a complex domain. And if this stuff excites you, by the way, this is absolutely the territory that's occupied by industrial and organizational psychologists, but also educational psychologists. And you definitely need postgraduate training to be able to understand all the different things that are happening here if you're interested in building and maintaining and running these types of assessments. Now, in terms of why companies bother to use these assessments, well, I've alluded to this a little bit, but I want you to understand that there's actually research on this. I mean, people study this, and what they've found over time is that gut feel, first impressions, the quality of a handshake, how professional you dress, these are not reliable indicators of your potential fit and performance and value to an organization. They're also not reliable indicators of whether you're going to enjoy working for a particular company and whether it's actually going to suit you well. So we need something better, okay? And assessments, like I said before, they enable a consistent, fair, and most importantly, job-related decision-making criteria. So the best assessments are actually suited for a particular employment context. So for instance, if you're going to apply for a job as a customer service representative, it's quite likely you're going to take an assessment that is angled and targeted at your service capabilities and the competencies you have to demonstrate service to others. You're not going to be asked to demonstrate your knowledge of proper safety protocol when interacting with patients in an emergency department. Like that would be ridiculous, right? And so that's a non-job related example. So when you guys are out there applying for internships, applying for jobs, understand that if an assessment's thrown at you, most of the time that assessment's going to feel and look like it fits the role. Where it gets a little tricky is that some companies are still using a slightly older model of assessment where they don't assess the actual suitability of you for the role, but they assess you more as a person. So this is where you go to a company and you take like a personality assessment. And you're asked a lot of questions about, who you are and how you tend to feel, and what your dreams are, and things like this. These assessments often make people feel a little wishy-washy because it's kind of personal. And it sometimes feels like, well, why does the organization want to know this about me? And what you got to understand is that the organization is actually not doing a whole lot with that information. They're actually using it to figure out, number one, were you willing to take the assessment? And then number two, they're interested in seeing how your personality profile matches in an aggregate sense with the general personality profile of other people in that role. Because we do know that when personalities align, that's a form and a level of fit, and it can help you feel comfortable and it can help you be productive in those future roles. But the best assessments you're going to see time and time again now are assessments that target your behavioral tendencies, the things that you're likely to do, the things that you're able to do, the things that you've done in the past. And that's what you're going to see more and more because the laws around the use of assessment for employment are increasingly stringent. The other things I want to throw out to you is that companies need assessments because it's really difficult to filter candidates without that information. You may never have thought about this as a student, but keep in mind, like there are many companies who process millions of applications a year for maybe hundreds of open positions. Like you got to understand the volume is that high. And so if you're a recruiter and you're trying to make sense of this and do your job, you need an assessment to help you make sense and cut through the chaff that happens to be there. The other thing to keep in mind is that, organizations, they like to follow each other's lead. So everybody's doing it. As I said before, 80 to 90% of organizations are using assessment. That's why a lot of companies have jumped on board. And I hate that logic, but that is the way it works. Like if one organization has a competitive advantage, the others are going to want to have it as well. The other thing that's useful for organizations is that they want to manage their talent, not just to get them in the door, not just to hire the right people, but they really would like you to stay for a while. And so the use of assessments has also grown because it provides managers and learning and development experts with actual resources they can use to tailor development plans. So for instance, if I give you a competency assessment day one, then I know already before you join the company where your strengths and weaknesses are. And then I can develop a management plan that fits you personally and helps you reach your full potential. And that's really one of the most perfect uses of an assessment is when it has utility, what we say pre-hire, and it has utility post-hire after you've joined the organization. All right. Now, there are limits, okay? And I want you to be aware of this. All assessments, keep in mind, okay, are efforts to what we call operationalizing. So that means taking something we want to understand and figuring out how to quantify it and qualify it. That's a tricky thing, and it's imperfect, especially when we're measuring psychological qualities, like a person's resilience, for instance, which is a really hot topic these days. What the heck is resilience? Like, it makes sense. It sounds really cool to use that label, but when you actually sit down and try to think about how you measure it, that is a really difficult thing to measure. And so any assessment is a proxy. It's a stand-in. It's not the whole thing, doesn't give you the whole picture, but it gives you something. And again, this is one of those places where something is better than nothing. But we have to keep in mind that any single assessment is deficient and imperfect. Now, for this reason, okay, many organizations, and the ones that do it right, they employ something called a multi-hurdle screening process. And this is what you want to see as an applicant. This is really something to look for, is that an organization is not making a decision based on one assessment, but they're actually looking at your resume, an interview. They might look at your past experiences. They might check your references. They might put you through a couple of different assessments. The point is, you have to clear each of those hurdles. That's why they call it a multi-hurdle approach, to be entered into the final pool of candidates. That type of process ends up leading to much better decisions for the organization and much better fit for you as the candidate. And these processes are really difficult to manage, as you could imagine. Again, if I've got millions of applicants and every single one of them is at a different stage of the process, I think you guys could picture how complicated that could get for a recruiter. And this is why there are other systems that organizations use, like applicant tracking systems. And that's a topic I'm going to talk some more about tomorrow. But this helps manage that process for them. And it's something that you're likely to experience as an applicant for an internship or a job. The challenge with multi-hurdle processes, though, is that nobody likes having to wait for a decision. And so it's a really big phenomenon right now for assessments, is that if the assessment takes longer than 10 minutes, organizations tend to lose candidates. This is what we've become as a society. We're not willing to put more than 10 minutes into an application for a job. But potentially the rest of our career could be driven by the results of this assessment, but many applicants aren't willing to stick with it. And so I just want to throw a caution out to you. I don't agree with this practice, but it's actually very common. Many organizations, they put out challenging assessments because their logic is, if the candidate's not willing to stick it out and finish this assessment, we're not going to hire them because they're not willing to put in the time to finish their application. Now, I don't like that logic, okay, but it is used. And so you need to understand, when you're out there applying for organizations, if they say to you, this assessment is important, even if they tell you it's optional, you better take that assessment and give it your best effort and stick it out, okay? Because the first filter they're looking for isn't even your score. The first filter they're looking for is, did you finish? Did you actually get through the darn thing? And then they're going to look at your score. Thankfully, though, many organizations are scared to lose candidates. And so there is a lot of effort right now in the space of assessment to create more positive experiences. And what does that mean? Assessments are getting shorter. They're getting easier. The instructions are getting better. The interfaces are getting more fun. They're feeling more game-like. This is all happening over the last 5 years. So when you guys are out there applying for jobs, don't be surprised if you actually find yourself in the middle of an assessment and you say to yourself, gosh, that actually was kind of fun. That wasn't that bad. That's the reality of these types of personality and career-related assessments right now. They're not threatening. They're actually kind of engaging, and they tell you a lot about yourself, and they tell the organization a lot about you. The last limit to career-related assessment I just want to mention for you, though, is that assessments are expensive. Okay, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry right now. When organizations sign on with a vendor to buy an assessment, they're often spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to use that assessment. And so the assessments have to be proven out, and the decisions have to be carefully processed and filtered through the assessment systems using the scores that the assessments generate. It doesn't always work out as well as organizations want it to. And this is why companies often shift vendors. So they might use one assessment for a couple of years, they're not happy with the results, and they'll shift and go to another vendor for a few more years. So I mention this to you as a candidate because if you're applying to the same company repeatedly over time, keep in mind that the experience could be totally different month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. And that's important for you to remember, because if you do apply to a company you like and you didn't like the experience the last time you applied, don't cross that company off your list forever, okay? Go back in another 6 months, go back in another 12 months. The experience could be totally different because that organization is likely revamping, refreshing, and trying to improve the situation. Last thing I'm going to throw out here too is, again, a lot of individuals feel that, assessments are just flawed. Am I not more than a score on an assessment? I mean, everyone always told me my whole life that I was way more than a number. And there's truth to that, okay? But keep in mind that to an organization you're applying to, they don't know you from anybody. And so right now you're a completely unknown quantity, and unknown quantities are scary and risky. And organizations have to be smart about who they decide to invest in. Keep in mind that when somebody hires you or accepts you to a graduate program, they're making an investment in you. They've decided to dedicate resources that are limited to your development, to your employment. And the expectation is that you're going to return the value on it. Okay, so they need to have a little more certainty, and that's what an assessment can provide. The assessments reveal your potential and whether you're likely to be more of an asset than a liability. A question I encourage you to learn to ask when you're facing an assessment, especially if it makes you uncomfortable, is what other fair and consistent methods are there for an organization to learn about who I am and the value I can create? It's simply not possible for most organizations to have a sit down face-to-face interview with every candidate who applies. I mean, it's never going to happen. And so the alternative is that they just hire the first people who apply. That's not fair. And the alternative is they just hire people who look like the people who work here. That's certainly not going to help with any sort of diversity and inclusion names. So assessments are actually, like I said earlier, a bit of a friend to you as an applicant because they open the door for you to join organizations that might not have otherwise considered you. Well-designed career assessments, in other words, are at least as important for you as they are for the organizations that are using them. So just a couple of takeaways and next steps, and then whatever time we got left, if there's any, we'll do a couple questions, okay? So career-related assessments are increasingly common, but they don't all look, feel, or function the same exact way. So don't expect one thing necessarily when you go into a particular application process. Just be really open-minded about it and make sure you read the instructions that are presented to you and you follow them carefully. You really can't, and you really shouldn't try to study for most career-related assessments. There are websites, folks, where you can go where people have posted so-called answer keys for these assessments. The problem is most good assessments are smarter than those answer keys, okay? And they're going to evolve and adapt. And if you try to follow a single answer key, all you're going to do is get yourself in trouble because organizations are tracking that kind of thing. One of the companies we work with is a huge telecommunications provider. And we discovered a cheating scam that was being tried out in one of the call centers. How do we discover it? Well, 25 candidates had exactly the same response pattern on their assessments. Now, we run hundreds of thousands of assessments for this company every year. So you might be thinking, well, how do we catch that? Well, it's super easy, guys. You just write a little program that tracks, okay, what is the pattern of responses and do we see duplications? So it's easy for us to catch it. Well, the problem was all 25 of these people ended up almost losing their job because there's a corporate policy against cheating. Assessments are so serious for this company that anybody even suspected of cheating can lose employment. And they knew that at the time of hire. So I don't actually know what happened to them because that was on the organization to make that call, but it's a serious business. So just go in and give it your best effort. You want to be honest because the results then will actually say something about you, not about somebody else's sense of what the right answer pattern would be. You really can stack the deck though in your favor if you're shooting for future goals. So the best thing you can do is, again, to not worry about the assessment, but to do everything you possibly can to develop and prepare yourself to be career ready. Remember, not all assessments are question and answer type forms. Sometimes it's interviews. Sometimes people want you to share stories and examples. Tell me about a time when, for example. You got to network like your future depends on it. Even organizations that have assessments, if you know somebody who knows somebody who likes you, who sees your potential, who's willing to give you a shot, that assessment's not likely to carry as much weight as it might for a total unknown. Do I like that that's the reality? No, I don't. That's kind of unfair, but it is the reality. Okay, the networking connections you make might actually be what gets you an opportunity to take the assessment. And this is something you got to understand is even companies that have assessments, they don't open their door to everybody in the world to take the assessments. You often have to pass the initial screen. You have to learn about the position. You have to apply to the position. You might have to pass a resume screen before you even get invited to take the assessment. So networking is still super critical. And you really need to target your work and development opportunities for which you know you have the qualifications to succeed. Okay, so in other words, good, that is job-related assessments, are going to help identify your fit, but that fit's going to be greatest in domains in which you have interest, in which you're motivated to put forth effort, and in which you actually have some relevant past experiences and training. So it could be related to your degree, but it could also be related to where you decided to put that work, put that knowledge and those skills to work. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot more that can be said about this topic, but at this point, I'm just going to open it up for any questions or reactions that you guys might have and try to put as many of you on the screen as I possibly can. I think I've got most of you here. And we'll just open it up here. Astounding. I love it. This is fabulous. Hi.
I have a question.
All right, Abigail.
First off, thank you for all this information. And second off, like when you're talking about analyzing strengths strengths and weaknesses. Do you have any recommendations for us on like certain things that we can do for self work to like analyze ourselves as we go into the job field, like specific assessments or just other tools that we can do on our own time?
Yeah, and I'm not going to endorse tons of specifics because there's just so many of them, right? But I will say there's a couple of assessments that the UTC Center for Career Development and Leadership Programs they use that are well validated and well established. So I definitely recommend that you make use of those, and you can set up appointments to take those assessments and get feedback. Danny can tell you some more about that here in a minute. There's also an assessment suite through the ONET system that I use in my classes and a lot of organizations use in coaching and development efforts. And I'll try to put it in the chat box here. It's on, let's see, maybe I can't, I might be blocked. There we go, online.onetcenter.org. There's a skills, let's see here. One of them is called a skills search, and the other one is called, it's an interest inventory. And what I like about these assessments is that these are free, first of all. And the other thing is that they're mapped onto this ONET platform. Now, ONET is the Occupational Network, Information Network, and it's an encyclopedia of jobs, okay? So it has linkages to all the types of requirements that different jobs might have, and it'll get you right into that system and help you identify alignments that might be interesting to you to pursue further.
All right,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to have to pause it there.
I understand, Mark.
Move, move to the next session. Thank you guys so much for participating today and being here and listening. Dr. Cunningham, thank you for all of that useful information. This session has been recorded, so it'll be available if you want to refer back to it. When I close this, that chat will be gone, so make sure you copy down that information to go back to ONET, and then hit up Dr. Cunningham if you have any questions and want to touch back. But thanks so much for participating, and we hope to see you at the next session at 10:30.
All right, good luck, guys. See ya.